over 900 African people groups are still unreached, with no viable witness to the transforming power of Jesus Christ. Hundreds of millions live behind political, geographical, and even religious barriers.
This is Africa. This is also my home. For over a century, Africa Inland Mission has sought to overcome these barriers through people compelled by Christ's love and the Great Commission.
Africa Inland Mission is 1,000 missionaries across more than 20 countries, partnering with hundreds of African churches, united in one purpose: Christ-centered churches among all African peoples. Communities of believers that display transformed lives, proclaim Christ, and make disciples. Africa Inland Mission is joining God in what He's doing in Africa and among Africa's peoples. Joined by countless prayer and financial partners around the world. Joining with the African Church in taking the good news of Jesus Christ to the ends of the earth.
Where are we at in this? And they came up with something called the Tokyo Declaration. Maybe you've heard of it. I really hadn't until AIM sort of sent us a little information on it, because they were present there. Our mission leadership went to this, and they came up with a few sort of conclusions about where we are at missions. And one of those is that the West, the Western world, which is the world that we're a part of here in the United States, is no longer the predominant domain of Western Christianity. And I'll read what they wrote here. It says, the preponderance of mission activity today is being engaged by what they call majority world Christians. Majority world is another term for the third world. The preponderance of mission activity today is being engaged by majority world Christians outside of the West, outside of Europe, outside of the United States. Christ's ambassadors are coming from everywhere around the world and going to anywhere and everywhere in the world. We rejoice that today's missions force is global in composition, bearing a diversity of thought, practice, and resources that enriches and energizes Christ's global cause as never before. Yet the corresponding reality is that the present-day mission task is so large and complex that no one church, no one agency, national missions movement, or regional mission block can take it on alone or independently. God has entrusted this generation with more opportunities and resources to complete the task than any previous one. We have more mission-minded churches, more standing structures and bases, more missionaries, more material resources, more funding, and more and better technology, more information and data, a deeper understanding of the task, and a clearer focus in our responsibility than previous generations. And recently I was in a village in Rwanda, and many of you have heard the stories of what happened in the genocide in Rwanda. So over almost 1 million people were killed in the genocide in 1994. And I listened to a woman as she told her story of her little community when the atrocities were going on in 1994, and how this young man from her community killed her husband and her children and left her a widow. And as this country is trying to build itself back together, Rwanda is a very small country. There's really nowhere to go except back home. So a lot of people fled, and they sort of stabilized things in the government and stuff. People are coming home, and so she's come home to her village, and so is the young man who murdered her family. And this scenario has been played out over and over and over thousands of times in Rwanda in recent years. And as a country, they've been trying to figure out, how do we deal with this? How do we find reconciliation to this woman and other situations like this? And I recently read a biography of Paul Kagame, who's now the president of Rwanda, and he was like the ousted rebel kind of army guy during the time of the genocide, and kind of fought his way back in. It's a tremendously amazing story. And sort of brought stability back to Rwanda. And he was being interviewed about these sort of things. And he says, they were saying, what's Rwanda doing about this? How are you as a government official dealing with him? And Kagame is not a Christian. He's sort of jaded on the church. The Catholic Church was very, very prominent in Rwanda at the time of the genocide. It's really turned a lot of people away from God because of what happened and the inability of the church to stop it. And Kagame, a man who's not a Christian himself, or says he's not at least, said this. He said in reference to people who now had to be reconciled to their neighbor, who just the ultimate sin against them, murdering their family. He said, this reconciliation is something only God can do. He said, as the government of Rwanda, as the president of Rwanda, we can't do this. We have no idea how to do this. But we see it happening, and this is only something God can do. And I really remember, I kind of think of that phrase a lot when I think about the things that are happening in Africa, the spiritual state and the needs, and the physical state of Africa and the needs, and the things that the world throws at this, and the inability to really, really, really make a difference. And what I see is the church. And it's beautiful, and it's amazing to watch. I wrote this. In the most dire of places, the things I've seen, in the most dire of circumstances, when the world runs out of ideas or simply runs away, it's the body of Christ, the church, that is able to minister to the needs and the hearts of Africans. There have been so many times, so many circumstances, where I have just desired, in the heart of hearts, to wipe away all the tears, to fix it all. When I walk through a refugee camp, or I see a church that's bombed out and a congregation that's poor and hungry. When you look at the AIDS orphans, when you look at the persecuted Christians in some certain countries, and you say, gosh, I want to fix that. I want to wipe away all those tears. And I'm reminded that's not really something God has entirely given over to us. There's a time in history when God finishes that. And the ability to wipe away every tear is something only God can do. And I picture God doing this. And I've seen that widowed woman, and I've seen that child hungry and bloated and malnourished, crippled. I've seen that pastor who's fled. His church was destroyed. Maybe his wife was killed, and he's running for his life. And I've seen all these situations, and I envisioned God one day, like it says here in Revelation 21, that God himself will be living with them, and he will be their God, and he will wipe away every tear. And I see God get down on one knee and wipe away those tears and finish it. Just finish it. And that day is coming. And that is a huge encouragement for a missionary in the fray, a missionary in the field, that God is working towards a glorious end that is directed and orchestrated by him. And we are participants in it. Blessed participants, privileged participants. Sometimes it's really hard, and sometimes it's painful. I have buried some of our friends in the soil of Africa. But God is working towards an end when he's going to wipe away every tear. And he is going to bring us to that place where those whom he has chosen, those who have chosen to worship him, will be worshiping him. And that is where we are right now, in the middle of that. That is what missions is. It's much more than the Great Commission. It's the Great Commission into something with tremendous activity and difficulty and trust and reliance on God. And it is a beautiful thing to be there.